All right, well, welcome back, everyone, to the HC Conversations podcast. My name is Phil.
And I am Paul. And today, we're diving right into our topic.
Yep.
Today, we're continuing in our series that we've been in for the last couple months, where we're talking about deconstruction and why it is that people deconstruct or people walk away from the Christian faith. If you haven't been watching, you can find all the videos on our YouTube channel, which you are watching, so they're right there. You can also listen Spotify and
Apple
iTunes.
Podcasts,
Find those old episodes. But today we're diving into the topic of hypocrisy.
Yeah.
I left the church because Christians are just a bunch of hypocrites.
Yeah. So when we talk about these things that cause people to deconstruct or leave the faith or whatever that looks like, or maybe I'm still a Christian, but I don't go to church anymore. I'm following my own spirituality, whatever that looks like. I think it's important to understand that none of these are like objectively kind of like, oh, here's exactly, we can test and prod this. Like these are just kind of, as people are polled or they're asked, like what are the things that commonly come up? Right. And this is a huge one. Well, Christians are just a bunch of hypocrites. Now, sometimes that gets brought up, and that's the reason that I feel like somebody gives because they've not really thought about why they've left. Other times, it's legitimate. Right? Sometimes it's like, I don't know, why did you leave? I don't know, I don't have a better reason. So let's go with the hypocrites one is popular.
Right.
So let's talk about that. Christians are a bunch of hypocrites. First thing I would say, yep.
Yeah, we are. Yes.
Okay. That's the podcast, everyone. We'll see you next time.
So yes, Christians are a bunch of hypocrites in that we believe one thing and then we do the other.
Yeah.
The Apostle Paul talked about this.
Yeah.
For I know the good that I ought to do, yet
I
don't do it.
Keep on doing the thing that I hate.
Yes. Yeah. And so
oh, what a wretched man I am.
It's something that Christians have dealt with since day one. But it's not unique to Christians.
Nope.
This is a uniquely human problem because if you're a Christian or you're not a Christian, this is something that all humans deal with. So if you would consider yourself a non-religious person or maybe a secular humanist, you are a hypocrite as well.
Yes.
You believe things, you have standards, and yet you fail to live up to those standards.
Let's just pause.
Yeah.
Let's just take a moment. Whoever you are, you're listening to this, you're watching this, I want you to find a mirror and just look in the mirror and say, I am a hypocrite. Does that hurt? Is that painful? I mean, it should be. It's not meant to be insulting. Like you said, like this is just part of the human condition. You have your standards, I have mine, and we don't always do that. We don't live up to that. Not even close. Right. Most of the time. You want a depressing activity. Like just track in a day how many times did you do something or think something or say something that would have been like, I don't do that. I don't say that. I don't believe that. I don't treat people that way. I don't act that way. I don't eat those things.
Oh wait, I just did.
Yeah.
That makes you a hypocrite.
Yes.
None of us have an airtight belief system or practice. We are all inconsistent in our beliefs. The challenge is coming to recognize that, okay, I actually am, instead of denying that that you don't do anything wrong. And I think that makes you a bigger hypocrite if you're like, no, I'm good. I do everything right and according to what I say I believe.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say then the issue is it's not necessarily hypocrisy that's the issue. It's the, in Christian terms, it's confession that's the issue, and then repentance that's the issue. It's owning and recognizing I am a hypocrite. I don't do the things that I know I should do. So then uniquely, this is actually what, in the conversation of hypocrisy, it's ironic that it's like, well, Christians are hypocrites because Christianity is the only religion, it's the only worldview, it's the only system then that deals with that.
Right.
That looks at it square in the face and doesn't say, hey, try not to be, or here's a way that you can live a perfect life or whatever. It says, nope, just admit the fact that you're never going to be perfect, you're always going to fall short, but good news, you don't have to be, right? Like Jesus has been perfect on your behalf, right? He's lived the perfect life, died for you so that you can be free of that. And so like then the issue becomes with our hypocrisy is like from a Christian perspective, as we're pastors and trying to work through this, isn't necessarily am I not being perfect? Am I not loving people? Am I not? Because like that's what we do. Sometimes we're not perfect. We lie. We judge people. We hurt people. We say things we shouldn't. Whatever that looks like. The issue isn't do I do those things because I will, and that's not to make an excuse for that to say, oh well, we're going to do those things, so yay, I can. Like No, like the Apostle Paul talks about that as well. Should I
Should
go
keep on sinning so that grace may abound?
By no means, right? So we do like strive the Spirit working in us, like we're trying to be sanctified, look more like Jesus, not do those things. But the issue isn't, am I being perfect or not? The issue is, what am I claiming that I believe? Am I claiming that I am perfect and that I do have it all figured out and then not having it? That's hypocrisy. But if I'm saying, gosh, I'm messed up and I shouldn't have done that, and I know I said I believe something else, but I did this, then that's not actually hypocrisy. Right? And so I think there's just there's that delicate, back and forth figuring out, walking that line of, okay, I'm trying to live away, but I recognize that I'm not going to. So as long as I'm not like, the real heart check then is the message that I'm communicating to the people around me that I'm perfect, or am I always pointing to Jesus and the fact that I'm not?
Right. And I feel like the issue of hypocrisy is remnants of an era in the church in the United States, and there's still churches like that today where you had to put on a face and act like you had it all together. Meanwhile, everybody outside the church or even within the church knew that you didn't actually have it all together, and so that you were a big hypocrite. That's not who we are at Hope Community. We try to be honest and transparent with our own failings and the fact that, we mess up, that we don't get it right yet, but for the grace of God and for King Jesus.
Yeah. No, that's good. So hypocrisy is an issue. It's a human issue. And I think it's just important to realize that. So whether you're a follower of Jesus or not, to just have compassion or have, Christianity would say, have grace for people, that's like, okay, you didn't do that. And I'll temper that by also saying that that's not an excuse for allowing a destructive behavior, right? Jesus talks frequently about, the least of these and the vulnerable and those who are hurting and loving your neighbor and doing those things. And so we can't just, brush things aside and say, oh, well, nobody's perfect, which is interesting. And this just popped into my head. And again, I think it's maybe the message that Christians have portrayed, that idea of like, oh yeah, we're perfect, we have it all together. That used to be the message. Is that we say this phrase, nobody's perfect, and like, oh, we have this grace, and we understand that nobody lives up to their values. That's a very popular thinking in the world. I made a mistake, no one's perfect. But that kind of grace is not often offered to Christians. Nobody, you need to be, because you said you're a Christian. And it's like, so again, it's back to messaging. Have we portrayed this idea of like somehow we think we are perfect? Okay.
Yeah. So along with that perfection piece, maybe you left the church or somebody left the church because it's just full of hypocrites. So you're not stating it, but you're acting like, well, I am the perfect one.
Ooh.
And if that's the case, maybe you should have stayed in that church to help disciple and train people how to actually follow Jesus and live a life that's consistent.
Ooh.
So maybe you need to go back into that church.
Dang, Paul.
Instead of walking away and just saying, literally to hell with them.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm not going to drop this.
Don't drop the mics. We'll have to pick it up and finish the podcast. But I've not thought of that. Like, that's really good though. Like if we leave a church because we say, well, they're all hypocrites, there is that underlying assumption that I'm better than them. Yeah. So there's a humility piece involved for everyone. So let's actually talk about then like the things that cause people to leave the church when they reference this idea of hypocrisy. A lot of times, and it's always important to just recognize our cultural moment. This is what's going on in our culture right now. It's not what's going on everywhere in the world. It's not what's been going on throughout history. It's not the big topics that we'll be talking about in 5 or 10 years. It's just we get blind to our cultural moment sometimes. Right. But currently, if you were to say, hey, drill that, what do you mean hypocrisy? The things that people would bring up, it's like, well, Christians or the church is, or Christianity in general, it's patriarchal, it's misogynistic, it's homophobic, it's racist, white supremacy, Christian nationalism. Like these are the things that will often get brought up.
Right.
And interestingly, nobody talked about these things other than the last maybe 10 years. Really, the last couple years has ramped up. So again, recognizing our cultural moment. I think the first thing we need to say is some of that does exist in the church. It is what it not is what it is, like to brush it off. But yes, that's legitimate.
There are denominations that exist today because they came about during the Civil War.
Yeah.
To maintain slavery.
Yeah.
And so then you have offshoots of those still around today that are very much hold on to, a racist perspective.
Yeah.
But that's not the majority of Christians in the United States. That's not the majority perspective of Christians in the world, because most Christians are non-white.
And this is off topic, but you brought it up, so I got to go there. A lot of people that go to those churches, just because a church split and came about because at the time of their founding, they're like, well, we want to still support slavery. We then draw the lines like, well, they're still all a bunch of racists. I'm like, I don't think that's how that works, because 99.7 random number % of those churches would be like, no, we don't believe that at all, but this is just the church that we happen to belong to, and
Right.
the church official doesn't believe that. So yeah, anyway, back on track. You were saying, I got us off topic.
I was talking about racism in churches that split during the Civil War.
You were, but where were we at before that? Because we're talking about
Different things.
hypocrisy in the church. Here are our cultural moment kind of things. Oh yeah, we got to own that, and you were in the process of owning it.
I was.
Brains in my head, just one, not always fully functional.
Yeah, so that's one example.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, that has existed. The church has been hateful and judgmental towards groups of people in history. We talk specifically about the LGBTQ conversation and people in that community. It's like, yes, the church. I hesitate to even say the church, because the church doesn't do anything.
Right.
People do things. So people who have claimed the name of Christ have been hateful towards people in certain communities.
But that does not mean that if you hold to a traditional sexual ethic according to what Jesus taught,
That you
are hateful towards people in the LGBTQ plus community.
Exactly. And so that's where we start mixing things together, right? It's well, you're associated with this group, so all of you
It's
are.
really easy to paint with a broad brush and say that if you are this, then you're automatically associated with that.
So again, not excusing. Yep, there have been people who have been hateful. There have been people who have been racist. In our moment right now, there are people who are like whack job Christian nationalists that are like, I really want to drop some names right now, but you can find them on YouTube, and I'm not going to. It's like, yeah, and you're like, oh, look how many people go to that church. It's like, okay, yeah, there's a few thousand people in a tent. I might have given it away. But the church, broadly around the world, consists of 1/3 of the world's population, are followers of Jesus. So billions of people. So a few thousand looks like a lot in that snapshot, but is not even a drop in a bucket. Okay, and so yes, that exists. There are some crazy people, but that is not the position of most. And so on one hand, if you have said, hey, I've left the church because of hypocrisy, let me say I'm sorry. And the things that you saw in certain people, not in the whole church, but in certain people, was wrong.
Right.
And this should be a check for all of us, followers of Jesus. You look at the people of God from Israel in the Old Testament through the followers, the very disciples of Jesus, the 12, to the early church, through the church in the past 2,000 years. Within those who look like they're part of the people of God, there are always those who actually aren't.
Jesus talked about this.
There was a true Israel within Israel. You had Judas of the disciples. You had disciples in the early church who were basically just looking to turn a profit. You had things done throughout history, which is a whole nother conversation, whereas crusades and those kind of things were actually it was more about national politics than faith. It's just every country at the time had this is our church, and so that's a different thing. But it's there's always true followers of Jesus in the broader context of people that just claim the name of Jesus. Right. And so if you've seen that and if you've been hurt by that, we are sorry. It shouldn't be that way. There are people who claim the name of Christ that are not actually Christians. However, let's also temper that by recognizing, again, there are, I don't know what the number is. I wish I had the number off the top of my head. I think it's how many billion Christians are there?
I don't know.
What's the world's population? Does anybody remember? Anybody remember? I'm talking to you like they're actually here.
I think it's 8 billion.
It's it's a third of the world's population, isn't it? How many people are? Just Google it. Google knows all. That's not true. Paul's Googling.
I am. Right now on the podcast, I am Googling.
This is real time.
2.2 billion followers, representing 31.5% of the world's population.
So while, yes, there is hypocrisy, well, we already kind of covered the hypocrisy conversation. Now we're talking specifically kind of about people that are doing really un-Christ-like things and seeing no problem with it. See, that's where the line is. It doesn't even come close to representing like a tiny fraction of that 2.2 billion. 2.2 billion with a B. I'm sorry. I just thought, with a B, billions of Christians. Now people are really going to be mad about the podcast. It's just too easy. It's too easy. I mean, because then I got to go, huh? What's a billion? See, I made everybody mad. We'll edit that part out. No, we won't.
No, we'll leave that in. All right, so.
The point is, we're getting back to the point. We as Christians have to own the hypocrisy and like speak up against those things and call for confession and call for repentance. But I think we should also challenge people who have said, well, I left because of hypocrisy, when really you left because you just disagreed about something. Mm-hmm. Okay, you may claim patriarchy and misogyny, but maybe that's just a complementarian church, meaning they think there's a difference in roles between men and women. And there can be that where it's abusive, but I've also seen churches that just are beautiful and they love everyone really, really well, and yet they have a complementarian position. Mm-hmm. That's not hypocrisy. You just disagree with them.
Right.
As you said a few moments ago, there may be, like most Christians still hold to a traditional sexual ethic. Like that doesn't mean that they hate people that they disagree with. And so it's like, well, okay, you may disagree with them, but that doesn't mean they're being hypocrites.
Right.
You know, you may find yourself in an area where, well, this church is homogenous. It's all like white people. So the church
must be racist.
The church is obviously racist. And it's like, well, the majority of the church around the world is not white. And it did not start as a white religion.
It just so happens that the majority population in that community is white.
Yes. I mean, let's just be honest. The community that we're in, it's like, hey, we're not going to look super diverse ethnically. That's not a reflection of our community. Hopefully we have a diversity of ages and socioeconomics and, thought process and all those kind of things. And so, again, there is hypocrisy. There are things that need to be called out. But at the same time, let's pump the brakes a little and understand that there is a big difference between they're hypocrites and I have to leave versus, well, I just disagree. And sometimes, it's not healthy to even stay. Like sometimes there's such strong disagreements that you need to leave. Well, then go find a church that you still agree with. Like don't walk away entirely. Right. And actually, I think the more faithfully biblical thing to do when we look at what the early church did, it's like you disagree, figure it out. We're a family. There's going to be disagreement. Love each other anyway.
Yep.
So, soapbox moment done.
All right, so let's put a little bow on that.
Ooh, it is it's a couple days before Thanksgiving. Can I mention Christmas?
Can you put a turkey on it?
I was gonna say we put a bow on it like a Christmas present. Am I allowed to mention that? Is it too early to mention Christmas?
No, it's before Thanksgiving. No Christmas lights up yet.
Sorry.
The music.
We have decorations at my house.
Do you really?
Yeah.
Shiloh was wanting to get our Christmas tree up out over the weekend.
Oh my gosh, guys.
We got to go buy it. It's like, no, we have to have Thanksgiving first. Let's just appreciate one holiday at a time.
I'm a walking sermon
Hypocrite.
Illustration right now.
Yeah,
people have heard me say for years, like I am passionate about no Christmas until after Thanksgiving. We put Christmas decorations up last week. Just in the house. Okay, there's no tree, there's no outdoor decorations, but it was just, we had time and our lives are busy, and so I did not live out what I believed.
Hey,
forgive me.
So let's put a little turkey or bow, whatever, on it, and just say, hey, if you left the church because of hypocrisy, come to a community, join the hypocrites here.
Amen, brother.
We would love to have you,
well,
or maybe if you don't live close to Hope Community,
find a good church.
They
do exist.
They do exist, and give it another chance.
They're the ones that don't make headlines, but they do exist.
Yes.
Yeah. Let me bow that a little bit more. It's a double knot. It's a double knot. We're double knotting this bow of like if you're a Christian, you're going to mess up. We're all going to mess up. Own it. Just own it. It's much less painful and embarrassing to own it than it is to be like found out about it and pretend that you're perfect. Like, so own it. Yeah. And if you are someone that's left the church because of hypocrisy, like Paul said, like jump back in and find a church and be a part of changing it. Like don't leave because something's broken. Say, I'm going to be part of fixing it, because the world needs the church.
Yes.
Our communities need the church. I'm not talking about just Christians. Like that's important. But I'm talking about like the actual like institutional, organizational, this thing called the church, because nothing has made in the past, it continues to make in the present, will make in the future. Nothing has made, with all of its flaws and warts, has made a greater impact for good in the world than the church. And so, yeah, it's broken. So be a part of bringing health and wholeness to it.